The Radio Forest Podcast.
Hi, Forrest. This is Colt Stephens with Monster Jam.
What's going on, man? How are you today?
Fantastic. How are you doing?
Good. Are you in Idaho yet? When do you guys get to town?
I actually don't fly out until the morning. So I'm still in Texas at the moment, still staying warm down here in Texas.
Hey, it seems like a lot of Monster Jam drivers, end up from Texas. Do you notice that too? And why is that?
I think we just like big trucks around here. I noticed that as well. There's a lot of drivers that come. We got Tristan. There's a few others that come from Texas, and I just think we're into off-road, and it's just something in our blood, and enjoy Monster Jam.
Now, Colt is the driver of ThunderROARus, also was in Brodozer for a while, and your dad, he was the driver of King Crunch. Talk about how you've seen safety features change from your dad's time driving to your time, because you've been there since you were like 1 year old. So it's like the NFL or the NHL. Just in 2 generations, the change in safety equipment is insane. I imagine it's just like that in monster trucks.
Oh, there's absolutely no doubt about it. Watching from where my dad came from, that was originally just a regular old truck that they lifted and put big tires on. So it was a steel body truck, regular seats still in it and everything. And then now where we're at is completely different. Now we sit in the center of the truck. We're a full tube chassis. We got 26 inches of travel in the front of the truck with 30 inches of shop travel in the rear. I mean, the safety aspect that back in the day, the misconception was that you wanted a nice padded seat, but we want zero padding in a seat. I run a special made seat that's molded to my body. That way I don't get the whiplash aspect of it whenever we do these crazy side slaps and stuff like that. The belts, we run a 7-point harness. There's not very many motorsports out there that run 7 points of contact in our seat belts. And we run that just to keep us nice and tight inside those trucks. Because they're 12,000 pounds, and whenever they're flying through the air and they land and they get crazy, it could give you a whiplash. But as long as we're locked in tight, which we are, we're 100% safe. And that aspect has changed. You remember the old Bigfoot days, they would be hanging out the window, one arm hanging out the window as they're crushing cars in a regular seat, steel body truck. And you see the old videos of them slamming around inside there. That's completely changed now, but that's allowed us to get even wilder and crazier and see those crazy moves that we're doing in these Monster Jam trucks because we stay so tight inside of them.
You get like insane air and you're doing backflips in ThunderROARus. So what does that feel like then when you hit the ground? Is it not much of a shock or you don't bounce as much? I mean, you still have to feel it for sure.
Oh, that's one thing that me and my crew chiefs are always talking about. We're always talking about shock settings, and that's 100% the aspect of that. And that the big air, yeah, sometimes, it does hurt. Whenever it bottoms all the way out, you do feel it. It's like somebody described it one time as falling from heaven into a pillow. And that's pretty much exactly what it's like. It's awesome. It's amazing being up there. You feel so great, but eventually you have to come down from that huge air, that backflip. When you come down, you know it's coming. Luckily, you can take it. But sometimes if you don't set the truck up just right, where it lands correctly, you will feel it and you will bottom out, and it kind of sends a shock to your entire body. And the misconception is you landing on all four is smooth. No, actually the best way to land a Monster Jam truck is if you can dig one tire in first and kind of rock it in 1, 2, 3, 4 on the tires instead of all four. Whenever it just flat lands, that absolutely just slams you to the ground. But yeah, you do feel it. It's not as bad as you think, but it's crazy. You got 66-inch BKT tires, and that actually acts as a little bit of suspension too, because whenever that tire flexes, it takes a little bit of that load.
Now, what about your first backflip? How do you do the first one? Let's say like skateboarding or motocross. I know they can get foam pits and kind of practice getting used to the rotation. With a monster truck, do you just get enough speed and they're like, all right, I think you could do it this time, get your RPMs up to this much, and then just hit it?
Well, I was lucky enough on my very first backflip, I got to talk to the professor, Tom Mintz, who works at UNOH and Monster Jam, drives Max D. So he's done plenty of backflips. But, the first time you do a backflip, it's pretty nerve-wracking. You just want to get through it, to be honest with you. But the right aspect of it is reading the ramp, knowing kind of what the ramp's going to do, whether it's steep or if it's laid back a little bit for the big air or the little bit lower, slower backflip. But you want to run in about 15 miles an hour. And that's hard to say. We don't have a speedometer, but you're guessing around 15. Nice and smooth, come into transition. As soon as your front tires hit that wall, you're going to just lay on it. To the wood, wide open, get that truck to rotate. Now, as it's rotating, you can actually, this is what's crazy, you can control that truck slightly with the tires. It's like a big gyro. So you can use the throttle and the brake to either spin the tires to continue the rotation around, or you can hit the brake and kind of slow the rotation down. But it's a small window you can do that. That way you don't break parts. You don't want to land on the brakes, and you don't want to land on the throttle. But you want to be kind of in that sweet spot right there, and you're looking for the ground. And once you see the ground, you're going to stop the rotation of the tires. And then once those stop, you're going to kind of come down and float down and land. And if you can do that and time all that perfectly, you're going to land a beautiful backflip. But it is very difficult, and the timing in the window is extremely small. But you're right. There is no way to really practice. We're in these Monster Jam trucks. We don't practice backflips just because the failure rate is so high and it's expensive. So we only get to do them whenever we come to the event. And so there's not a lot of practice, but we kind of got it down to a science. Dirt Crew kind of has it dialed in. If we can get together and you can get your timing perfect, it ends up being one of the most special backflips and perfectly executed backflips.
Does every truck in Monster Jam steer from the front and the back? Does that just depend on the driver, or is that standard?
No, that's 100% standard in a Monster Jam truck, just because of the turning radius. You got to think these tires are really wide, and we can't turn that sharp, especially when we get into arenas, if we didn't have the rear steer. So the rear steer definitely helps us out. We're able to do those crazy donuts, and we can get through tight spots and turn. What's crazy to think about as a driver is sometimes it's actually easier to use a rear steer because you're hitting just a switch. So I'll just use my right thumb, and I'll turn the rear steer 100% one way to the other with just a switch, and it's a quick movement. When you steer with the front, you have to turn the steering wheel, and you have to do 1.5 turns almost each way. So sometimes in a predicament, rear steer's faster because I just flick a switch and I've already got it turned all the way. So it's kind of a cool concept whenever you think about it that way. But yeah, 100%, we have to have the rear steer to get through some of those tight moves. And that's when you see sometimes too, we can actually crab these trucks sideways and get into tight corners and tighter spots than you could parallel parking your regular car.
Do you think ever with the technology, when you said, rear steering with the flick of a switch, it had me thinking about VR. You could have like all the trucks just running and you're somewhere in the arena, just kind of like those flight simulators. I bet the technology is there now. Has there ever been any talk about that? I mean, I don't think the fans would want to see the driver removed, but that would be kind of a cool event too.
We talk about it all the time, but one thing I think makes a good driver too is the fact I think that VR is capable in a Monster Jam truck. There's no doubt about it. I think it would be a cool concept, but as a driver, I don't ever want to see it happen, obviously. But at the same time, I think what makes a great driver is the ability to feel the truck. We use all of our senses when we're in that truck, between the smell of the brakes, the smell of the motor, the smell of what's going on, our vision, our body. I use my body so much in feeling what's going on, vibrations, how the truck's reacting and stuff like that. And that's something that I don't think you'll ever get in VR that creates a great driver. You don't feel that truck shift over when the sway bar moves a little bit, or if it is landing hard, then that's when you break parts because it blows through the suspension, bottoms out. When it bottoms out, that's when you break parts. And that's things that you don't get from VR sitting in the stands that a driver feels and can and tell the crew chief and make the truck better and better every single weekend. And that's an aspect that I think VR is going to lose. I do think it's capable, and I do think it'll be cool, but I think that one little – the senses of a driver is what makes Monster Jam great and makes these trucks keep escalating to that next level.
So what's the tax then on your body? You said you're using your body a lot in this truck. You've got shows Friday, 2 Saturday, and 1 Sunday. That's a lot. I mean, does it feel like what you anticipate or what you think a professional athlete goes through? Because just staying tense and in the turning and the butt clenching, I mean, you got to be exhausted when you're done, right?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. There is a lot of physical aspect to this sport, and as far as being tired, there's no doubt about it. Sunday night, whenever the show's over, I'm going to be right in bed because I'm going to be wore out like I just, did the Super Bowl. I just ran 100 yards, 10 times, and that's exactly right. My heart rate's going to be elevated. Everything's going to be crazy. I'm going to be excited. My adrenaline's going to be running and stuff like that. As far as soreness goes, I will be sore too. That's a little bit, you're beating and banging around in there and getting in the truck, but just like any other athlete, as you progress and as you do that sport, your body gets used to it. And my first event of the year, I'm definitely more sore than I would be later on in the year. And that's just how it goes. As you progress and you go, you get in better shape. We do work out in the hotel rooms. We try and get on the treadmill, ride the bikes as much as we can. That way we can keep our heart rate up and kind of keep our cardio in good shape so that when we go out there, we can perform, keep our body good and healthy, and keep going from event to event.
Do you track your heart rate or anything like that in the truck? I know some professional sports, they'll wear like a sensor, keeps track of their heart rate, their oxygen, and then they know if they're like ready to start the game or not. There might be a pre or an after game shake. Maybe they're missing some nutrients. Have you seen anything progress like that in monster trucks? I'm sure with like even an Apple Watch, you keep track of your heart rate.
In the beginning, no, but in the last few years, I 100% think that's the way Monster Jam's going to keep going. There's a misconception that Monster Jam is a scripted sport or anything like that, and it really 100% isn't. And as we keep progressing this sport, everybody wants to win, and we're always looking for that edge. And I 100% think that is coming. I think it's going to come down to physical aspect, just like Supercross, just like sim racers changed motocross and all that stuff, because it went from a regular sport to it's one of the most physically demanding. And I feel like that's the way it's going to go in Monster Jam too. I think drivers are going to continue to push themselves. They're going to try and get in peak athletic performance. That way you can go and do a minute freestyle or a 2-minute freestyle and not waver. We do have drivers that do wear the heart monitors just to see where they're at. And you want to duplicate that during the week. If you can go work out and keep your heart rate at that rate that you are when you're freestyling on a truck, whenever you go out there and do it for 2 minutes, it's not a big deal. You're not out of breath when you get done. So I do see this sport progressing that way, and it is progressing very quickly because we're all gunning for that championship. We're all in a championship. We are wanting to win as drivers. We want those bragging rights, and that sport is progressing so fast because we're pushing each other so much each and every weekend.
Now, for 4 years, you were a commercial diver. What is that?
Yeah, underwater welder.
I knew a guy that did that down in Florida. Isn't that pay? Like, first of all, it's super dangerous, but don't they get paid a ton because there's so few guys that can do it?
Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, for 4 years, I'm an adrenaline junkie, so I was racing motocross my entire life before Monster Jam and stuff, and so that's kind of what I wanted to do. That aspect of things is so hard to get there and a lot of injuries. And I was like, man, what am I going to do? I've been racing motorcycles my whole life. What am I going to do now? And we had some friends that were into diving. We're making good money. And I was like, hey, this sounds fun. So I ended up going offshore and did a lot of diving. I worked in the Gulf of Mexico. We were underwater welders. So we did everything from setting habitats. I swam with sharks. I've done all that crazy stuff. Everybody talks about scuba diving, but I was in a hard hat is what they call it, hard hat diving. And I would be on the bottom of the ocean. Deepest dive I've ever had is almost 400 feet. And actually went into a chamber and stayed inside a saturation chamber for a little bit there and lived inside of what would be considered like a space station for 26 days on the boat. So kind of climb inside there and you live inside that thing. That way you can work and stay at the bottom of the ocean. And I'll tell you, it's adrenaline. It's crazy. It's like you're an alien in an alien environment, working on that stuff. And we saw a lot of crazy stuff, saw a lot of, obviously fish and sharks and stuff everywhere. The aspect of actually welding and connecting two pieces of metal underwater is crazy, the stuff that we did. It was definitely an experience. Unfortunately, the PP still happened and kind of halted everything. But I'll tell you, that's exactly whenever my career with Monster Jam started taking off. So I'm a firm believer in everything happens for a reason.
Is there one of those water bathrooms that you have to swim into, disrobe, and kind of let it fly into the ocean? Is it that situation, or is there something else going on?
Yeah. 100%. So yeah, this is kind of nature's calls. You got to do your thing, and you just kind of go off because we wore hot water suits. So you got to go take that off a little bit if you got to. But yeah, in the chamber you have toilets and stuff, and you'd have somebody that had to come flush it for you. But yeah, it's definitely a weird aspect. There's plenty of stuff on YouTube you can check out. As far as it's hard to explain, but living as a diver in a chamber, in a saturation chamber for 20 days and going up and down to work inside of a bell is what they call it. And you go down to whatever depth you're working at, that bell would open, let you out, go to work for 10 hours, and then come back up and connect to the SAT system on the deck of the boat. But you're kind of locked in just like a space station. So definitely a lot of information there, but it's crazy. It's wild. It's definitely adrenaline. You got somebody watching it all times. It's pretty crazy.
So do you see any like old timers? Is there anybody that does that for decades? It's kind of like the military. You don't stay in that high stress situation for a long time. So was there anybody that was that underwater diver welder that had been doing it for 20 years, or do they then move to management?
You don't see much. Yeah, you don't see, usually we always say about 10 years or so, just because it's hard on your body. Between your lungs, and then the pressures also are hard on the pressure so much that it pushes all the stuff out in between your knees and all your joints. It pushes all the fluid out that helps it stop rubbing, and you have your bones actually rub bone to bone. And to push the cartilage out, all that stuff. So it wear and tear on your body is extremely difficult whenever you're in satin. And depending on how deep you work, if you do a lot of low, if you're in shallow water, it's not too bad. But if you're working in over 200 foot of water for a long period of time, yes, 100%, the wear and tear is bad on your body. And on average, around 10 years is the most you can dive, and then it's time to go. You can go recreation after that. But as far as working, you're going to be a manager or somebody running the sat chambers, or training the next group of guys coming up, because it is very hard on your body.
Now, how's that Jeep coming along? Is that done? Tell us what you got going on at home with your Jeep.
Oh, man, I got always working on Jeeps. So my dad and I also, we run a shop. It's an off-road shop. We do lift kit, tires, and wheels, and that's where we started. That's kind of where we started with monster trucks, and we started off building a truck and got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But all of a sudden, it was a monster truck for my dad. But then that's continued on. It's Texas Truck Works. I'm building an Ultra 4 car, which is like a race car that goes across the desert at 100 mile an hour, or it crosses the rocks. It's kind of an all-around car. It does a little bit of everything. I say car, it's more like a Jeep. But, I've been trying to get that done as much as I can between what I have going on with my daily builds for customers at Texas Truck Works and with Monster Jam. But it's getting really close. It's going to have a 6.2 Corvette motor in it, so it's going to be about 700 horsepower. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Full tube chassis. But I'm a fabricator by trade. Like if I ever get done, and that's why I love Monster Jam too, is because I'm able to take some of my fabrication stuff that I like doing. I love just melting steel and putting it together, cutting steel and all that stuff. And what better way than Monster Jam? But kind of all that stuff meshes together, and it allows me to do what I love every single weekend.
What were the first couple of cars that you got into? So your dad's in the business. He's the driver, of the King Crunch. So you're around that your whole life. You guys got your own business going on in Texas. So what did you start with? Because everybody has like a first vehicle they get into. Yours probably was different than the most average person's.
Honestly, I just never really been into cars. Cars in general. I can't even when I get a rental when I'm on the road, I absolutely hate riding around in cars. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'3" and I'm 230 pounds. So, getting in a car alone is difficult for me. But I've never been a car guy, but trucks. My first truck would have been, a 1997 Chevy 1500 extended cab. Had a 6-inch kit on it. I don't think I've ever owned a stock vehicle. I've never owned, more than a week I've had a stock vehicle as far as stock wheels and tires. I think every vehicle I've owned within a week has a 6-inch kit on it at least and 35-inch tall tires. That's just the way we are. As soon as I got it, I always laugh when I go to a dealership and the dealership's like, it's got alloy 20-inch wheels on it. Well, I don't care. I'm going to take that stuff off right away. I just want the truck. I don't care what tires. I don't care what bumpers are on it. I don't care. I'm going to change all that stuff within a week. And that's kind of my thing is as soon as I get it, I can't stop tinkering. And I'm a tinkerer. I'll build stuff. And if they don't make it, I'm going to make it myself. And that's kind of how I live by. And I always see, it's funny, my wife gets so mad at me sometimes because we'll be driving down the road and I'll be like, oh, that's a nice truck. And, I never stop. Oh, look at that truck. Oh, wouldn't that look good on here? Oh, that package looks good. I never stop looking at it. It's just something that's a part of my life and always will be.
Colt Stephens, he is the driver of ThunderROARus in Nampa, Idaho, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Colt, last question for you. How many hats do you think you own?
My wife hates me because of my hats. Everywhere I go, I get a new hat. I have no idea. I know I have 5 at all times that are my go-to with different colors, and they're my clean hats. Dirty hats, I got them everywhere, just in case. And that's what I always tell her. I got them strategically placed just in case I need it, and they are everywhere. I have no idea. I bet you I have 100 and something hats out there. But 5 of them right now, I'm looking at them right now, hanging on my wall. They're my go-to, my freshies.
Pit passes for Saturday's show. There's races Friday, 2 on Saturday, 1 on Sunday. It's the ThunderROARus driver, Colt Stephens from Texas with Monster Jam. Colt, we'll see you in Nampa this weekend, buddy. Thanks for the call today.
Hey, thank you, guys. And make sure you check out that pit party. Come see me at the pit party because it really doesn't do any justice of how big these Monster Jam trucks are until you see them and you stand next to that 66-inch BKT tire. These 12,000-pound trucks will leave you in awe. So make sure to come to the pit party. Come hang out with me. That's an opportunity to get autographs. Sometimes we change some tires. Everybody wonders how you change the tires on these trucks. Well, that's the opportunity to see that. You can do a body change. You can see these bodies up close, the fiberglass bodies and all that. So make sure and get to the pit party. Come see me. I'd love to see you guys. I'd love to sign stuff for you. So come see me at the pit party.